The One is a new 8-part drama series that's just arrived on Netflix, which asks interesting questions about relationships and predestination and the importance of people having the right to choose the person they spend the rest of their life with. Today, I'm lucky enough to talk with one of the stars of the series, ZOE TAPPER, who you will know from a raft of award-winning and very popular drama series, including genre shows like Demons, Night Flyers, and the criminally, I have to say, criminally early cancel survivors, which I'm going to have to ask you a little bit about later on because I love that series. But I'm talking to ZOE TAPPER. Hello, ZOE. How are you this morning?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. Really well. How are you? The sun is shining. It's a
Sun is
beautiful day.
shining. We're starting to get vaccinated, so the world is looking as if it's going to get a little bit brighter.
I know. Thank goodness for that. There
Yeah.
definitely feels like there's hope on the horizon, doesn't there?
Well, it's been a long old haul. How has the this last strange year been for you, sort of personally and professionally?
Well, I feel like when anyone asks me that, I have to sort of pose the caveat that, in the grand scheme of things, absolutely fine. I've been lucky enough not to lose anybody very close to me, and so in that respect, it's been okay. Work has been a bit quiet. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, everything shut down, so all the lights went out and it all felt a little bit worrying. But now it really feels like things are picking up again, and lots of productions are starting to happen, and I think everybody needs more content. So I think there's going to be a real sort of flurry of dramas being produced towards the end of the year.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's been challenges as everybody has had. I mean, I've got 2 little children, so they've been at home and I've been homeschooling them, and all of those things are new and quite full on, but we've got there in the end. How about you? Have you found it?
It's all been fine. It's the hardest part is the not socializing, not being able to go out and see people, and that part of it. But as you say, you've got to put it in perspective and say, I've not been ill, none of my family have been ill. Fortunately, I don't know many people who've been seriously ill, but some families have been devastated. So you've got to sort of thank the lucky stars and just look to the future that things will be a bit better at some point.
Absolutely, yeah. And it does feel like we're slowly coming out of the darkness, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned about sort of new content and things, one of the things that's kept so many people going, of course, are the box sets of the new series that have arrived, and The One has just arrived fairly recently. I'll just say up front that I absolutely loved it. I watched it over 2 nights. And I'm not, even this day and age, I'm not a great binger. I'm of the old generation that watch things, an episode a week. So I'm still getting my head around the idea of binging these things. But I watched 2 episodes on Friday and then 6 episodes on Saturday night. It's one of those things I couldn't put down. It is like a book that you can't put down. It reminds me of like a novel you pick at the airport, and you just sort of, it's like a holiday book. It's a real page turner. Can you tell me a little bit about the character you play then? You play Kate Saunders, who becomes involved in this investigation, but there's another sort of layer to her life as well. So let's set the scene for us.
So One is set a short while into the future, and it revolves around this idea that there's been a scientific discovery that you can match people to your soulmate through their DNA. And at the very start of the series, my character, Kate Saunders, who is a detective in the Metropolitan Police, you see her in her more sort of personal life, and she's just decided to take the test, and she's been matched with a woman who is living in Spain. So they can't actually see each other to begin with. They're Zooming like this. And then as the series progresses, we realize that the company that this match service has originated from has actually been involved in a few shady dealings, and there's been a crime, and my character is tasked with investigating this crime, specifically surrounding the CEO of Match DNA, who is called Rebecca Webb, and she's played by Hannah Ware. So yes, you really do see 2 sides to my character. You see her sort of very driven, workaholic, truth-seeking side as a police officer, police detective, and you see her also in a much more sort of vulnerable state when you see how her relationship develops with her match.
That's what I particularly liked about your character and her story, and it must have been attractive to you as an actor, that you do have those 2 sides. She's the dedicated police officer, plus she's got her own private life. And a lot of cop shows, those sort of things dovetail and they drift back and forth. But here, it's like two sides of the coin. So that must have been quite nice for you to go in and do the policey investigating stuff, and then have all the human relationship and how your character copes with this match that she wasn't expecting. That must have been nice as a performer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I found, and what sort of attracted me to the character from the very start, was that actually on the face of it, she is she's got her life together. This is a woman who knows what she wants. She's very successful in her career. She's reached an age where she's, you know, financially stable, and the only missing link is this sort of partner. And I think in her mind, it's a very practical decision to make, to join the rest of the country, it seems, and join this match service, because she hasn't got time to kind of go on loads of dates and meet loads of people. Yeah. So in that respect, I think it's quite refreshing, because she seems very, very at ease with the person that she is. But as you say, as the series progresses, this match turns out to be quite a tricky one, and there's lots of revelations that end up causing Kate's equilibrium to unbalance. And I think that was really interesting for me to play, because it's quite nice to be able to switch from that very sort of driven, sorted persona to then somebody who actually is starting to show some cracks in her personal life. And yeah, I really relished that challenge.
How did you get involved in the series? Were you offered the role, or was it a script that came your way that you thought, I've got to do this?
Yeah, I was in the sort of usual way, really, of getting a job. I had an audition for it. I was actually on holiday when the audition came through, so I was a little bit more blasé about it, because I was a bit sort of, you know, desperate to go and have an ice cream. But sometimes actually that turns out to your advantage, because you take the pressure off yourself a little bit. So I just remember doing this tape on holiday and sending it off and not really thinking about it too much. And then by the time I got back, fortunately, they had enjoyed the tape and asked me to come in and have a chemistry test with Yana Perez, who plays my match, Sophia. And then we both got the part, and we went from there. So it was fairly seamless, really. It was nice. And then I read the book that it was based on, and really sort of dived into it.
Yeah. How would you describe it as a series? Because obviously it's got this science fiction conceit that it hangs on, but that's sort of in the background. It's more about the characters. And I know a lot of the publicity has described it as science fiction, but how would you describe it, particularly, especially because a lot of people are a bit wary of science fiction? They think of spaceships and aliens and Doctor Who, but this isn't quite like that, although it's got a high concept behind it.
I don't really view it particularly as science fiction. I mean, obviously we're dealing with a scientific concept and premise that is fictional, so it is theoretically science fiction, but at the same time it's only a short jump into the future. It's also I would describe it more as a psychological thriller. I would say you know, we're very much delving into the minds of these characters, and the psyche, and what happens to your psyche when science is placed alongside love. You know, those are two sort of completely opposing, you know, things that don't normally kind of coincide. And so I'd say it was more of a sort of psychological thriller with a bit of sci-fi and a bit of romance thrown in. I think that's that's more true to what it is. And even though it is sci-fi, it sort of feels like it's not totally impossible. It doesn't, you know, in these days when we're always, you know, things have changed so much in the space of a year, we can't predict what's going to happen from one day to the next. We've all suddenly got used to communicating by Zoom, which a year ago it wasn't really the thing to do. Dating changes so quickly that, you know, it doesn't feel like something that would be completely implausible, I don't think.
So having said that, I think it's Rebecca's character that says a couple of times in the episodes, you know, we've changed the face of dating permanently for the future. Do you think something like this in the real world would be a boon to society or a curse? Because it sort of takes away that element of choice, and it makes it almost like a mechanical sort of thing. How do you think that would work in real life?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I would be very worried if this was the way that for the future of dating. I think there's something about, again, we were talking earlier about lockdown. It's what we're all craving is the human interaction that we're all missing. And I think if you take that out, if you take away the ability to meet people organically, or in bars or in restaurants or through friends, and also you take away that element of making mistakes and it being messy and all of that, which sort of shapes who you are and shapes your decisions in life. I think it takes out the humanity of it. And I think, you know, obviously there would be problems as well, as the series explores. You know, you might be matched with someone completely inappropriate, you know, somebody who's spending their life in prison, or there are so many possible ramifications to this discovery that I think it would probably be hugely detrimental to society.
I think one of the strengths of the series is that it is an ensemble show, because it's not about any particular character or characters. You've got lots of different characters, and as you say, some of them are in different positions. You've got the two characters who are married and apparently happily married, until one of them makes this decision to find out who her partner soulmate actually is. As a performer, then, when you're in a show that's like an ensemble like this, presumably the filming schedule isn't quite as punishing as it is if, say, you know, you're carrying the show or a lead. Presumably you're sort of not there every day 9 till 5 or 9 till 7 or whatever.
Well, interestingly, that would normally be the case. But interestingly, on this, they actually condensed the filming schedule into a much shorter period of time. And in doing that, they actually had 2 full film crews filming all the time. Right. So actually, we were filming predominantly in Bristol and Cardiff, and in a studio in Newport, and then we had a little week in London to do some exterior shots. But we had 2 film crews running concurrently the whole way through. So actually what happened is I was in, you know, every day and pretty much filming solidly for most of the day, because, you know, I just do everything in just a more condensed period of time. But what it also meant was that you didn't really see the other characters very often. Yeah. So, you know, I was just as intrigued as everyone to sort of sit down and watch it, to watch everybody else's performances, and to see, you know, Hannah, who plays Rebecca Webb, and I didn't actually get to film our scenes together until the very end of the filming process. So we barely knew each other, and so by the time we'd actually got to meet each other, there was this kind of, I think, a really good chemistry actually between us, because we were so sort of keen to sort of find out a bit more about each other, both personally and in the show. Yeah. And yes, and I, you know, I relish the chance to sort of sit and watch the other storylines as well, because I really hadn't seen or you know, even seen the actors very often in those strands. So it was it was a strange one.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned about the filming, because I'm actually from Cardiff. Oh, really? Although I live just outside Cardiff now. And the first 6 or 7 episodes, it was sort of London and inside, and all of a sudden I thought, hang on, that looks a bit like Cardiff. The bit in the garden, the sort of memorial garden in the civic centre. I recognise that, because I used to work around that area.
Oh, and then right.
It's lovely. It's, but Cardiff has come on so much over the last few years. It's really
I love being in Cardiff. I had visited Cardiff before, but I hadn't sort of spent a prolonged period of time there. So I really loved it. And it is a little bit deceptive, because lots of the interiors we all filmed, like my character's flat. Was that in Cardiff or was that in Bristol? That possibly was in Bristol actually. But we filmed, as you said, the exteriors where they had the big conferences. That was in Cardiff. And then we had they built a film studio in Newport where we did lots of the interiors. The interior of Rebecca Ware's house was in a studio. It wasn't actually a real house. And then we just had a kind of really intensive couple of weeks in London, just doing all the sort of exterior stuff. So it was. We kind of traveled quite a bit on that.
Do you like location filming? Because obviously in the studio you've got the controlled environment. Location is sort of subject to the weather and, you know, people wondering what's going on. Which do you find more conducive to you as a performer?
I love being on location actually. I just, you know, I think that's such a lovely part of the job, that you get to visit places that you've never been before. I think one of the places on this job I'd never been before was the Gower, and I went there for there's an amazing house that Dimitri, the sort of friend of Rebecca Webb, the other scientist, he has this incredible house.
I wonder where that was. Yeah, that glass sort of looking down over the
glass front, and we're just surrounded by nothing but beautiful sort of vistas. And you know, I had a scene there where I go and sort of interrogate him, and And you know, that was really spectacular. And I remember we were staying in a hotel down the road, a sort of really beautiful old country house, but we were the only people there. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was, you know, I arrived late at night in the darkness, and then I sort of knocked on the door, and nobody answered. I was thinking, oh no, I'm going to be stuck here and no one's here. And then eventually a lady came and welcomed me in. But yeah, I think location shooting is much more exciting. I think once you're in the studio, everyone sort of relaxes a little bit more, and it gets a little bit, you know, whereas I think when you're on location, everybody's on their game, and I like that.
Was it all filmed pre-COVID, or was there anything you had to pick up afterwards, or was it all completed beforehand?
No, we were really fortunate. It was all filmed. In fact, we finished it just at the beginning of March. So I mean, we were absolutely on the edge of what was to come, which was obviously no one had foreseen. So yeah, sometimes when I've been watching it, it feels quite odd, because it you know, so much has happened this year that it just feels like that was a bit of a dream, you know, that we were all kind of working those hours and traveling around so much and hugging and kissing and all the things that are part of the show, which sort of slightly jars now, because you just think that's it's such an alien world for us. So hopefully we'll get back there soon.
It is. I find that watching films and TV things now, watching people even shaking hands and standing next to each other, it just seems like an impossible thing to ever do again.
Or if you see big crowd scenes, or you know, you just see, goodness, they're all so close to each other. What are you doing?
You know, with all the costume changes and all that sort of stuff. I know that all the productions have got very good COVID precautions in place, but it must have an impact on the scale and size of things until people get used to it all, I suppose.
Yeah, I think they've been remarkable, actually. I think the industry just absolutely grabbed the bull by the horns and kind of got on with it, and worked out these procedures, which are now sort of very commonplace. I did a film, actually, sort of relatively close to the start of the pandemic, and already they had everything in place. We had COVID tests, we had, you know, everyone wore masks. It's a bit trickier, obviously, with actors, because if you're filming them, we can't wear our masks. So you know, you have to obviously make that safe for everybody. But I think they've done a really, really good job to make everybody safe, and it seems to be working, because I've not heard of anything being shut down because of COVID.
No, I mean, as you said, we had that initial period when everything shut down, but then a few months later, things started picking up again. Going back to the one and your character, obviously the whole series is quite tightly plotted in terms of the arcs of the characters. Did that give you any opportunity at all to have any input into the characters as you went along? Did you have opportunities to say, well, actually, perhaps this might be something she would say, or she might do this rather than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had the first 3 or 4 episodes up front when we started filming. So we didn't completely know what was happening, you know, in the later episodes, until a bit later on. What was brilliant was we had directors who were very sort of sensitive and sympathetic to kind of our opinions, and wanted to kind of bring us on board. And we had producers who did that too. So yeah, certainly if we felt that, oh, I don't think that's what my character would say or do, there was a line that we could ring, or we could speak to producers, or we could speak to the directors, and they would definitely take that on board. But there's always a slight element of surprise, because you're filming, you know, quite intensely, and so there's not a great deal of time to prepare. You've got sort of quite a lot of work in evenings to kind of really be preparing for your scenes, and so then suddenly a new script comes through for episode 6, and something massive happens. I mean, I think I'm allowed to say spoilers now because it's all out there, but you know, the sort of the moment with Sebastian, when my character suddenly kind of has that connection with him, kind of took me by surprise, because I'd sort of in my head totally absorbed myself into this relationship I was having with Sophia. That, you know, but I love that. I love to have something that really throws a grenade into the mix, and you have to, you know, because exactly that's how we live our lives. That's how we do in real life. Goodness, just as we've seen, we just don't know what will happen. So, you know, I sort of thrive of that, really, that sort of challenge to kind of take new things on board relatively quickly.
And as a viewer as well, I think it's quite good that you get those sort of curveballs that you don't expect, and particularly fairly late in the series, this suddenly happens. It introduces this element of, well, actually, you could have two soulmates from the same sort of genetic pool, if you like. So it broadens things out a little bit, and I suppose it takes the slight sting off that feeling of this cold and clinical feel of this. Well, there's one soulmate. Well, there might actually be another one, and of course, that could, for you as an actor, of course, it creates that sort of thing. You've got to get your head around which way you're going to go and which part of your heart you're going to follow.
Exactly. I mean, it's the way, you know, I think it's been very, very cleverly edited, actually, and just like you say, it's conducive to binge watching, because these little hooks that suddenly appear at the end of an episode suddenly, you know, blow your mind a little bit, and you go, oh, hang on a minute, I was just going down that path, and now all sorts of other possibilities have opened up. So yeah, I think it's great in that respect.
Well, that's what I found watching it, because I planned to watch a couple of episodes, but then on Saturday night, I think it was, I thought I'll watch 2 more, and then what's going to happen? You know, you literally do have to.
And it's impossible to resist when you've got that Netflix countdown as well, because it just you know, it kind of gives you the pressure of going 5, 4, 3. Oh, okay, I'll do another one. So it's almost irresistible, really.
Is there any difference working for Netflix and say the BBC or ITV in terms of the way things are made, or any interference you get, or not interference, but any involvement by Netflix? Does anybody there sort of?
I don't think the actual logistics of filming differ that much. Apart from it was the first job that I'd filmed with 2 film crews running the whole time, although I don't necessarily think that's a Netflix decision. I think that was more the production team. I suppose the only difference I can think of off the top of my head really is the way that it lands, because I think with a BBC show or an ITV show, there's normally a build-up. You'll have a sort of promotional campaign that leads up to the show, so people get used to seeing these little adverts and teasers coming on the screen. Whereas really with Netflix, they sort of just drop it and then wait to see what happens. And you know, we did very little promotion really leading up to the show starting. Now it's obviously become very popular. People are really interested to talk to everybody, but I think that's a slight change. They kind of, I think they rely on the power of the audience to show their support and on with word of mouth. And I think that sort of is a bit different to how it feels when you're in a show on other channels.
Yeah, as you said, the show is just put out there and people find it. And I've done it myself. I've recommended it to people who've been watching it. So I really like this. They might not have known about it, and it does work. And it's an interesting way to build an audience and to build.
It really is. And I think now that Netflix have this, top 10, which is also because I think part of those streaming services, the difficulty sometimes is that you sit down and there's just so much content that you kind of a bit baffled about what to go for. And suddenly there's, I think, in our case with the One, sometimes you can find a real sort of hidden gem when you're scrolling through, but I think with the One, because it's been very instantaneously popular, it's suddenly at #1 in the Netflix chart, and that I think also has a big effect, because people kind of go, oh, okay, I don't really know what to watch, but if that's popular, we'll give it a go.
Yeah, that's true. Has there been any word of a second series? Because obviously there's a lot of things. I mean, it's a series that you can watch and be satisfied with, but there are threads obviously that will carry on. Has anything been said to you yet about the second series?
No, I've got no exciting information on that front. I feel as though everybody's very pleased with how it's been received, and I think the viewing figures are good, and I think that the way it was left sort of sets it up for another series. So I would really, really hope, I'd love to do another series, and I don't think Kate has quite finished with Rebecca yet. There's still more to eke out there. So I would love to do another series, but I certainly haven't had the green light on that at all yet.
That must be, again, frustrating for you when you feel that there's more story to tell, but it's in the lap of the gods, really, whether you're able to tell it.
Well, that's so true, and you kindly brought up Survivors in your introduction, and that was, incredibly frustrating, because we did 2 series of that show. It was a BBC show that was, goodness, it was quite a few years ago now. But we're all set up, I think, at the end of the series to do another series. I mean, it was left on a huge cliffhanger. And then for whatever reason it was, and I don't think I ever really knew, it just wasn't recommissioned. And to this day, I still get people writing to me saying, we loved Survivors, and do you think they might come back, you know, even after all this time? And and in a weird way, though, of course, it was strangely prescient. I mean, it was exactly the world that we're existing in now. So it's perhaps a bit too close to the bone.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Well, I was a big fan of the original 70s series. It's one of my cherished shows. So when I heard it was coming back, being rebooted, I was a bit sort of, because those sort of things don't
always a bit worrying, isn't it? Because you don't want it to sort of tarnish your memories of the first one.
But I think it was a very considered update, and I think particularly the second season, it really found its feet, and it was really going somewhere. And I liked the conspiracies, and there was that one particular episode about this guy who'd been enslaving people and getting them working down the mines. That was a really bleak episode, and I thought, wow, this is really strong stuff for a sort of an early evening audience on BBC One. I thought, wow, this is really strong.
It was actually incredibly hard hitting. And yeah, I'm still incredibly close to all of the actors who were on that show. There was something about it that we all really just bonded. And I think it was a brave show. I think it was fascinating. And of course, I remember when we were filming that, there was the swine flu outbreak.
Oh, right.
And I remember that being quite eerie at the time, because we were obviously filming in a world, you know, Survivors, for those people who don't know, was a world where you know, there was this killer virus that killed off 90% of the population, and the only people who survived were the ones that had sort of natural immunity. It was kind of this natural selection on a grand scale, and then the swine flu kicked off, and I remember it feeling a bit sort of scary, but goodness me, yes, looking back now and what we've all just been through, it really was quite terrifying.
Well, I think it's the sort of thing now that we've gone through something like that. I think people are suddenly more aware of how fragile everything can be. You know, okay, it wasn't the end of the world, but it sort of felt like it sometimes in the darker days of it. But yeah, I just think it's a shame that Survivors was sort of, the rug was pulled out from it so soon. And apparently, when it was on Netflix, it was very popular, and there was I think Netflix were making inquiries with the BBC about carrying it on a few years later. But
I never heard that. Yeah, I knew it was popular on Netflix as well. But I mean, wouldn't it be fascinating to, in some ways, explore kind of 10 years on and what the characters are up to now, and how the world had developed from that where we left it. So I mean, that would be quite an interesting thing to explore, but who knows, someone might make it.
Yeah, you never know. Are you a fan of sort of, because I said you've done a few sort of, I'm trying not to say science fiction, but sort of genre things over the years. Is that something that you're particularly interested in, or does it depend on the script and the character?
I think everything always depends on the script and the character. I certainly love that genre, and I've certainly embraced it when I've had the opportunity to do it. Yeah, I think most things are all about the script, and if you get a brilliant script, it doesn't really matter what genre it is, as long as you feel like you can explore an interesting character and say beautiful lines. But I do, you know, what I love about, I did a film which actually hasn't really been that widely seen. I think it's possibly on Sky Movies, but I did a film a couple of years ago called ZOÖ, and it was filmed in Sweden, although it was meant to be set in London, and it was actually, again, a similar premise to Survivors in a sort of way, and sort of eerily prescient to what's happening now, and it was about a couple who were in a very sort of dysfunctional place in their relationship, and they were sort of moving apart and kind of on the brink of divorce. And then there was a public service announcement to say that there was some sort of what was described as a terrorist attack, and that everyone had to stay indoors, and they had to, you know, be locked down, really. And then we find out that it's the terrorist attack that they speak of is actually zombies. It was a zombie movie, which makes it, which always makes me laugh when I say that, because, you know, it was actually beautiful, and I loved the script, and the zombie element was there, but it was more of a presence rather than seeing kind of, you know, animatronic zombies or anything. And what it then explored was what that did to the relationship, that sense of having to be contained, fighting for survival, what that does to a couple, and you know, and I think I loved that, and I think that's what sometimes sci-fi does, is that when if we are trying to explore characters or minds or relationships, sometimes a slightly alternative look at it can actually give us more insight. And I sort of, I am intrigued by sci-fi in that respect. And then there's also the fun element. I mean, I did, as you said as well, I did Demons, where I had to be a vampire and I had vampire teeth, and that was great fun. So there's loads of sides to sci-fi that definitely appeal to me.
It is sort of dressing up and sort of the playground sort of thing, really, running around sort of fighting monsters and things. It's a great fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to go back to, because I think we're sort of running out of time, unfortunately, to go back to the one, then to wrap up, I get the impression that it's something you're sort of proud of and you really enjoyed doing. How would you sort of sum up the series and sell it to people who haven't watched it but might be interested from what we've been saying? What would you say is its USP?
I think it's a series that explores what happens when love and science collide. And I think that is such an intriguing premise. And, what our show certainly shows is that it's explosive. It's explosive.
Yeah. Brilliant. What can we see you in next? Anything in the pipeline that we need to look out for? While we're waiting for series 2?
Well, we're waiting for series 2. Yes, I did. So the film that I mentioned that I'd filmed during lockdown 1 was a film called Aya, which is a British film set in very different thing to the one. It's a real sort of dark British film set in a maximum security prison, and it follows the journey of a really dark human who has killed and is in prison for life, and you explore the sort of his life in prison and the brutality of the system and the brutality of his relationship with his fellow prisoners. And I am introduced as a character who is a social worker, and she comes to see this man who is going to be in jail for life, to tell him that his daughter, who he hasn't really seen since she was a baby, wants to come and meet him and wants to confront him about what he did. And it's about trying to sort of unlock the humanity in a man who seemingly has completely lost his humanity. Wow. And so, I think it's going to be really beautiful. I'm really excited to see it. And it's very simply shot because, of course, we were in lockdown. And so lots of it is filmed in just one prison cell. So that's coming out. I don't know exactly when, but that will be the next thing that I'll be in.
COVID does seem to have made people be a bit more creative, and the intimacy of stories they can tell. It doesn't all have to be big bang flash. You can tell interesting stories in restricted locations with restricted casts. So
and I think that's what we've all found during lockdown, when people have been probably watching more television than usual, is that actually some of the best stories are just about the intimate relationships between two people. I think at the beginning of lockdown we all binged Normal People and I May Destroy You, and they were actually fairly simple stories about just two people connecting, and sometimes I think we underestimate audiences and think that we have to throw in a million different things and explosions and CGI, and actually sometimes it can just be about beautiful scripts and beautiful acting, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Zoe. That's great. Well, we look forward to seeing series 2 of the one. I keep my fingers crossed. I recommend it to anybody out there who hasn't seen it yet. And also personally, I hope that maybe in a few years' time we get Survivors back, which I'd love to see.
Let's put that out to the universe. Let's hope someone jumps on that. That would be great.
Thank you very much, Zoe. It's been lovely to chat.
Thank you so much. Really lovely chatting to you too. Take care.
Thank you very much for your time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.